For 200 years, precisely, Britons have been crossing the world to live in Australia. At first, 160,000 of them went reluctantly in chains. But as their prison camps softened into a promised land, others left home eagerly, searching for a better life. In this series, we'll be meeting some of these Poms, the Welsh and Scots and Irish, who are living with Waltzing Matilda. And through their eyes and lives, look at their new homeland as it prepares to celebrate its bicentennial year. Is it true the rainbow ends down under? In our first programme, 3 couples living their new lives in the remote corners of Australia, in the outback and beyond. Seen from afar, this must be the traditional dream of Australia. Great cattle stations, big as Belgium, farmers lean and chestnut brown, cheerful, hard-working wives, all riding proud in the saddle. We don't see the flies, the endless struggle to survive, the loneliness under vast and empty skies. Our first migrant blends so perfectly into her surroundings, you'd think she'd been raised in the outback. In fact, she was born in Welbeck Street, London, W1, and came out to the bush to be a wife and a mother. But then one day, back in London, her young sister married into another world, and she too was transported.
This is Jane Makim, the bride's sister, in a green and red striped heavy silk jacket belted tightly at the waist with a straight skirt. And I believe it was made in Australia. The hat is by Frederick Fox to match.
Jane Makim, who's married to an Australian and has a very different life from the life that her sister Sarah Ferguson's going to have. She lives on a sheep farm, several thousand acres, with her husband, who she married when she was just 18. And her son is going to be one of the pages here, Seamus. And Aisha, her daughter, tiny child who was just christened in the village of Dummer at the beginning of July.
Today, wearing one of the Duchess of York's cast-off sweaters, Jane Makim musters the cattle for market with her father-in-law and husband Alex. They met when he arrived at the family home in Hampshire to help with the Ferguson ponies, and were married in 1976 when she was 18 and Sarah, her bridesmaid, was 16. The sisters are close, but until the Yorks' royal visit to Australia in 1988, they can only get together on the telephone. The Makim property is not easy to reach. From Sydney, you fly north for a couple of hours to Moree, then drive for a few more hours towards Queensland, and somewhere outside the tiny hamlet of North Star, population 100, you may find the Makims hard at work. This outback life also changed quite abruptly for young Seamus Makim, aged 5.
And what a pretty, pretty sight. Pages and bridesmaids. The page boys dressed either as sailors or midshipmen.
Ex-midshipman Seamus has been dropped by the school bus at a lonely crossroads a few miles from his home, along with a classmate, 5-year-old Holly.
Is this his girlfriend?
No way!
I said the wrong thing.
Holly, Seamus your boyfriend?
Polly? Is he not? Now, how did Seamus take to the Westminster Abbey life?
I think it sort of came rather quick and went rather quick, but he enjoyed it. He talks about it a lot.
Does he?
Yes.
Yes. What does he remember?
I think mostly he remembers going in the carriage, kissing Sarah when they arrived at Buckingham Palace. Oh, I know, the noise of the band. That was a bit overawing, I think.
Yes. I mean, they were very little people, and they did march.
They did, very well.
He was wonderful. An occasional yawn, but,
Oh, yes.
because they got up early.
Very early, 6 o'clock.
Yes. Yes, and what are your memories of it?
My memories? Oh, gosh. Sort of, I think my biggest memory is seeing Sarah and Dad walking down the aisle together and just remembering what Dad, slightly different when I got married. Dad used to say funny things walking up the aisle to me. I'm sure he would have done the same to Sarah, sort of to make her relax. And then when they came up closer to us, I think it was sort of a really proud moment seeing them both.
But I mean, Fergie, you're very close to.
Sarah and I are close. Yeah.
Sarah and you must be close, yes. Yeah, she has a rather different lifestyle now.
Yeah, she does.
She's not been here, of course.
Yeah, she has.
What?
She came here in 1978 with Dad. And Dad's at home in the cattle yard, Seamus, with his shoelaces undone and getting bogged in the cattle yard.
Oh. Seamus, give us a yawn, because everybody enjoyed you yawning at the wedding. Give us a quick yawn.
I can't.
And a kiss now for all the bridesmaids, because they'll all insist on it, I think, and all the pages too. That's Peter Phillips, smiling broadly, Princess Anne's son. A real happy family wedding return home, because Buckingham Palace, for the time being, will be their home.
Jane's home is this 50-year-old dilapidated ranch house on the 8,500 acres that Alex owns with his father and two brothers. Agriculture is depressed today, and the crippling drought has shriveled many farmers' incomes into the red. Their property lies amid the endless flatlands near the northern border of New South Wales, where they now have 9 horses, and Seamus grows up as happily horsey as his parents. They're taking care that Aisha, aged 5 months, also has a good seat. I wondered whether there were problems bringing up a young family at North Star.
Problems? Well, other than snakes and spiders, I don't think so. Lots of people have brought up children here.
Yes. I mean, you've got a good school for
yes,
Seamus, anyway.
There's a very good school at North Star. Yes.
And what about, I don't know, childish ailments and that sort of thing?
Well, there's there's 4 good doctors in Gundawindi, and there's a hospital. And
Oh,
yeah.
Boo-boo,
Yes.
look at Mummy. I don't want you to fall off.
she won't fall off.
What about, I don't know, where do you buy things? I mean, there's one shop within 10 miles, isn't there? And that's a little store.
North Star's it's quite a big store, food-wise.
Yes.
It has a mail run Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays, so if I want anything emergency like milk or whatever, that comes out on the mail.
Yes.
Otherwise,
3 times a week?
Yeah.
Is it? Yes.
Otherwise, Gundawindi's half an hour from here, which is...
But if you want to go and get your hair done...
What for?
What for?
I can do my hair.
I see.
No, but...
Silly me.
I don't... If I want to get my hair done, well, I've never... I think I've got my hair done once in Moree for the races.
Yes.
But otherwise, I usually... If I have an occasion to go to that I have to get my hair done, it'll be in Sydney.
What do we think of Sydney? You're such a country girl. I mean, is that the bright lights? Can you go to David Jones or and that sort of thing? Do you relish that, or are you anxious to get back here?
No, I love going to Sydney now and then. Yes, it's great to go there. And
there's something about parties, isn't there? Having parties and...
If you stayed here for a week, you would be so sick of the parties, you'd go very quickly.
Really? So you feel like a duchess, right?
I feel like a duchess. Not at all. I've been called the Duchess of North Star since we've been home.
Her Duke well knows a farmer's life is not an easy one, and their wooden home, which Jane says is baking in summer, freezing in winter, awaits a rise in the price of beef before she gets her new kitchen.
Yeah. I don't know, are the farmers feather-bedded here? I expect you are.
Not really. No.
They are
not at all.
In England. They always say
I know, it really makes me angry. I know, to see the subsidies they get over there, and in America it's the same. The farm lobby is very, very strong in America too, as I'm told. But we have a lot of cheap labour here. I have Jane.
Yes, yeah.
Well, we were exploited by by the British for years, all the colonies, and now we're getting a bit of our own back, you see.
Oh, remember that next time you get bogged in the dam.
Yes. Is it better? Would you rather be living here than in Hampshire?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not a Hampshire man or an Englishman at all.
And you converted her into an Aussie wife, right?
Yeah, well, she did marry from a castle, that's for sure.
The nearest to a castle you'll find in Western Australia is this old colonial homestead 70 miles outside Perth on the way to Kalgoorlie. Buckland, built just over a century ago. Today, the lady of the manor is the granddaughter of Lord Ebury, the Honourable Mrs. Penny Motion, now setting off to muster the sheep. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, Captain Tony Motion, late of the 9th Lancers, the Foreign Office, our embassy in Moscow, and MI5, prepares a little light luncheon. Their mini-stately home was built by James Dempster, an English seaman who, back in 1890, would make sure his sons were working hard enough on the family's grant of 8,000 acres by watching them through his telescope. So eagerly did he spy upon them that one night he tumbled over that balcony and thus provided the ghost without which no stately home is suitably furnished. Buckland was crumbling when the Motions bought it in 1982. After restoration, they opened to the public, and though it's not large or splendid, it is interesting enough for at least 12,000 visitors to take the $3 tour around its rooms each year, buying Penny's souvenir teaspoons and listening to Tony's cheerful commentary.
That painting's rather lovely, isn't it? Although it's an English painting. It actually hung in the Royal Hibernian Academy in Dublin from 1881 to 1883. But I thought it was rather appropriate for Buckland the wheat. You see, if our local wheat bins close, we're in trouble. How about that?
Before running Western Australia's only stately home on the tourist trail, Tony Motion was a Whitehall warrior who went to Moscow.
So you were the spy that went into the cold?
Oh, I don't think I was a spy. I certainly went into the cold. But of course I enjoyed Moscow. 2 years there was a fascinating experience. But I think, again, you see, our love relationship with Australia had started. And I don't suppose I'd be a very civil servant somehow. I was much more sort of entrepreneurially orientated, I think.
So how did you arrive at Western Australia's stately home?
I think I put enough Irish in me to say it was meant. I have a feeling if my
destiny
Irish grandmother was still alive, she'd be saying, well done, boy, you know, that was what all your career in Australia was really for. It was meant. I have a feeling it really was. I mean, I have no ambition left now, other than my ashes are scattered over the trees of Buckland.
You've got how many acres here?
1,250. Which is a nice little farm.
Horrible size, and a very handsome house indeed.
Oh, lovely house. Beautiful house.
See, in England, it would still be a beautiful house, but it wouldn't be quite as exceptional as it is here. This is a place of pilgrimage.
Well, it is exceptional in Western Australia. I mean, Western Australia was a very poor state. It was always called the Cinderella state, really up until the iron ore boom of the 60s. There wasn't any great inherited wealth, unlike Melbourne. An enormous inherited wealth in Melbourne. Huge sums. Here, it was a much quieter place than that, and not a lot of money. There were very, very few country houses built, and this was one of them. And I think it would have been a tragedy if this had fallen over, which there was a very good chance it might have done.
You have so many pretty things here. Do you find that light-fingered guests go through picking up little objets trouvés?
Only once in the 3.5 years we've been open, and it was a pom.
Oh, don't.
Yes, I'm sorry to tell you it was. And I suppose it takes one pom to smell another, you know. But I could sort of sense this woman. She was wandering around. She kept nudging me and saying, how do you like living here, then? I mean, you know, you and I mean, she lives here. I mean, she wasn't a visiting pom. She was a migrant pom. But there's that sort of pom who thinks that we poms will all get together and be better than the Australians. And I could smell this woman, you know. And later on during the day, I went into the drawing room. I've got sort of an eye check. I can flash my eye across the mantelpiece. And one beautiful little Sèvres powder box, patch box, was missing, which Penny gave me, actually. Lovely one. I bet it's that. It was a very busy day. And I waited till she'd gone out into the garden at the back. And about 50 people out there. I shut the door and I said, look, I'm terribly sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We've just had something stolen. And I am going to ask to look in your handbags. And I had my eye on her, and so I thought, I've got her, you know. And everybody, of course, else was just said, oh, please, please, you know. And I went up to her, and she had a shopping bag, and I opened it up. The first thing I picked out was a rotten little china ashtray out of the loo, you see. I said, now, that's not yours, dear, is it? I said, but I tell you what, you can keep that as a present, provided I don't find anything else. I went down to the bottom, and out came this little soap box. And do you know, she didn't turn a hair, nor did her husband, nor did her mother who was with her, and nor did her daughter. Not a hair. Anyway, I got it back.
See, I can't say that I would enjoy people trooping round my house, sitting in my favourite armchair, looking at me bits and pieces.
We don't mind that at all. It's part of our job. I mean, we're in the professional hospitality trade.
Aha.
And we are professionals, hopefully. And if people pay $3 to come and see Buckland, you can't just open the door and say, have a look. I mean, you know, it would be rather rude, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And very unprofessional.
Yeah. When you go back to England now, how do you find yourself?
The countryside in England, which I see occasionally, is just as beautiful as ever. The little villages don't seem to change very much. They're absolutely gorgeous. The people there don't change very much. So if I ever was forced to live in England, for whatever reason, I would choose to live in a little country village somewhere, and I'd be very happy.
But you wouldn't choose to do it. You'd have to be
I would prefer to
manacled in a ship.
I prefer to spend my rest of my life here because I love it. And my children love it too. And they're growing up very well here, very healthy. And they're not on pot, they're not, you know, they're normal, heterosexual, decent kids. And they really haven't got the sort of awful temptations and pressures to be anything else. So we love it as a family. That suits me. Can you imagine Penny and I doing this in, say, her family village in Oxfordshire or our family village in Sussex? I mean, that'd be going into commerce.
Our last pair of migrants live far from all tourists. You need a taxi to reach them. An air taxi. Three Hummock Island is a pinprick on the map off the northwest tip of Tasmania. John and Eleanor Alliston from Hampshire are its entire population, and the story of their pioneering life during the past 36 years is out of romantic fiction. Once upon a time, a gallant destroyer captain set out from Titchfield with his pretty young wife to start a family far from war-torn Europe. They headed for Tasmania, where land was on offer at 6p an acre, and discovered this deserted island without one essential service. Their nearest neighbour or shop was 40 miles away across pounding southern seas. They had no telephone, the radio didn't work, the house was a tumble-down shed, they knew nothing about farming. But from their island, they sent out into the world 4 children and 14 grandchildren. Now they're alone again.
Suddenly she heard the familiar thundering footsteps on the stairs and a look of terror crossed her face.
Eleanor is now 75, a determined dreamer with a practical nature. She rarely bothers to wind a clock or do much housework, but every day moves barefooted about the island, dictating romantic novels into her recorder. Under the nom de plume of Minka Jones, she writes of innocent girls called Tiffany who live in passionate conflict with handsome scoundrels in some sophisticated city of the mind.
What's up, she said. 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you disappeared. Yes, well, a man has a perfect right to disappear, surely. I'll go off for another 2 years. And then we'll see. Although it won't take you 2 years to get fed up with that idiot Sam. It'd take you about 2 weeks, I should think, or if you could stand him as long as that. Well, why don't you stop me marrying him? Why don't you tell me that you would like me not to marry him? Oh, God, you're welcome to marry him. Go ahead, and you'll suffer. You'll suffer, but I'll be back sometime to pick up the pieces, I suppose. And he walked out of the room, slamming the door.
She heard him depart. Down in the courtyard, the caterers and the florists and the bands, she heard them all again and realised that this was her wedding day. The end of that.
Eleanor's wedding day was more than half a century ago in 1937. Her groom was a handsome sailor. Commander Alliston, RN, ended the war as a destroyer captain with the Australian Navy. He's now nearly 80, but still copes with his island, still runs a ship-shaped vegetable garden, for he and Eleanor live like survivalists after the bomb. With much relief, he's got rid of his cattle and most of his sheep. To reach them, you charter a plane in the tiny Tasmanian town of Smithton, and after a bumpy half-hour over the Bass Strait, there's Hummock. And there, on the edge of its 35 square miles, the 2 cottages that make up the island's total accommodation. Sadly, the Allistons have never been able to buy the lease of their rented paradise from the government, so they'll be unable to pass it on to their children. After their long pioneering lifetime, they're still only guardians of this secret sanctuary with its empty beaches and wildlife instead of people. My descent was helpful for once, because John could use the taxi to make one of his rare returns to the mainland to attend a naval reunion. You can see it's a dressy day. He's wearing a suit. Eleanor's wearing shoes. So John flies away to remember old times and old comrades while we drive home.
It's always been a frantic struggle here financially, as you probably know. It just sort of ate up everything that we had. But we're thrilled with life. We absolutely wouldn't change an instant.
The tractor's driven by 2 fishermen who sailed in looking for the island's valuable catch of abalone.
What are those the...
Cape Barren geese.
Ah.
The funny little house, the funny little house.
Untouched by human hands since you first discovered it.
Yes, exactly. You've summed it up so well. Shocking thing.
Had you any idea when you left England what you were getting yourself into?
No idea whatsoever. When I walked into this house, of course, it's all with women. It's always the house, isn't it? John saw the beautiful land and the trees and the paddocks and the stock and thought that was absolute bliss. And I thought the house was hell, complete hell.
And you've been here 36 years and you haven't changed a thing.
Well, I beg your pardon, but our beautiful pine-encrusted sitting room and or whatever you call it, and lovely little kitchen. I don't think you've ventured in there yet, but I must introduce you to it. An exquisite bathroom.
Oh.
We have done that much. But you see, what we didn't realise was that if we didn't do it ourselves, nobody is going to ever come and do it for us. We waited 4.5 years for the old kitchen. We were going through the floor. It was a dangerous venture to walk across the room.
You swim every day?
I swim every day.
But it's jolly cold, the water here, I'm sure.
Icy.
Have there ever been times when you've wanted to give it all away and go back to the city?
Never got as bad as that, no.
Not even when it's cold and wet and windy and the plane can't get in and you can't get your mail and...
No, honestly, I can say that I am totally and utterly sold on every aspect of this island. I didn't ever realise or suspect that life could be so satisfying. And I used to be a fearful. I wanted things exactly the way I wanted them. I made them happen. Well, now it's absolutely too easy. It's like falling off a log. It's just wonderful.
Yet no sooner had you arrived here than your baby was taken very gravely ill and might have died. That must have been, that must have foretold what could happen here.
Yes, but that was, well, you'd think by the law of averages that couldn't happen again. It was the most terrifying and awful experience. It's a terrifying thing to have a child screaming non-stop, or rather about 2-minute intervals all through the day and blue in the face, and no way to get it to a doctor, no way to talk to a doctor.
But I mean, that's the kind of thing that can happen. It's just very fortunate that you and John are remarkably healthy. You've not had any alarms or excursions like that since you came here.
None, no.
Well, that's wonderful, but it might have happened. And
well,
I mean,
it might still happen, mightn't
you're
it?
a lady of a certain age now.
Yes, that's true. No, I won't say what. 173.
But, I mean, are you not at all alarmed that if you do need a doctor, it's a hell of a problem?
Oh, I'm not at all alarmed about that. Because you have a sense of impending disaster.
I mean, what would your attitude be if, in the middle of a force 10 gale here, that John has a heart attack?
Well, I'd be thankful that he wasn't going to have a heart bypass operation. You've only got to look at John to know that he won't have a heart attack. It's the same with me. I wouldn't have a heart attack. I might have an accident, and so might he, but I'd be very surprised. He's a wily old bird.
Back on the Tasmanian mainland, the wily old bird's collected by his daughter-in-law and grandchildren who haven't seen him for ages, certainly not with medals. He won a DSO, DSC and bar on active service in the Pacific, the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, escorting the Malta convoys.
The convoy had got through.
He was first lieutenant with these men in the Shropshire, a Royal Navy warship turned over to the Australian Navy to replace a sunken cruiser. Then, in the Philippines campaign, he captained their destroyer, Warramunga.
See, you are in fact both loners. You don't know what time it is because you don't wind the clocks. You don't know what day it is. You don't even know if it's Christmas.
No, not necessarily. Unless all the children ring up and say, we must remind you that it's Christmas, what are you doing?
Have you ever, I mean, has your curiosity ever led you to go back to England?
No, never.
Not once?
No. Well, you see, we haven't had time. And time is something we haven't had on the island. People say, what do you do all day? Aren't you lonely? Look, we're just flat out. We're absolutely desperate all day.
Have you both stopped being curious about the outside world?
Oh, we listen to the news like there was no tomorrow. Yes, the world roundup and the news is a must when we wake up in the mornings. We couldn't live without it, you'd think. We know what's going on.
I mean, you escape to an island, then you escape again into romantic fiction.
Something a bit funny there, you think?
Well, who is this other person called Minka Jones who writes about glamorous girls meeting chaps called Rhett?
She's just as real. She's the other side of the coin, and she has the greatest fun in the world.
Now, when you're striding up and down this deserted beach dictating your Mills and Boon love stories, does it occur to you that the girls you're writing for are probably dreaming about being whisked off to a paradise island by a good-looking sailor.
Yes, probably, yes. I think there's a lot in that.
Did you find that bringing your children up here made them different from other children?
Yes, I think so. They're very independent and self-sufficient, and they had to be handymen, all of them, girls and boys, to be able to do anything to help and to crew in the boat at the most unearthly juvenile age.
Yet they all went out into the adult world and they took conventional jobs. They were never tempted to come back here and try and carry on your good work.
Well, by that time there wasn't a living for more than John and me, if there was that, if you could call the overdraft that. There was no place for them. John and I either had to work the cattle and sheep by ourselves, except in the school holidays, but we couldn't give our children any money for doing what they did, and they did an enormous lot for us before they went. They've all got a really good stake in the place.
Now, you've made yourselves self-sufficient here. Are you totally independent?
No. I mean, there's always things like tea and sugar and flour. We don't exactly grind our own wheat and grow it, but we've got a lovely kitchen garden. Every single day of the year, you could say we've got 3 varieties of vegetable that is edible. John orchestrates his kitchen garden very, very cleverly.
And are you a super cook on top of everything else?
Well, I love cooking, and he's training me bit by bit to be a good cook, I think. I'm very interested in it, because we only have 1 meal a day, which is dinner. So we don't have elaborate lunches or breakfasts and with the usual sideboard array that you would have in England, or did have in England in our time.
You say you don't have time to do everything you want to do, but you read and you write. Have you not now, having lived together in this solitary way for 36 years, is
Yes.
it? Have you not said everything there is to say to each other?
No, that's the biggest fallacy in the world. That's a lovely question. I think that we're always covering new ground. It's absolutely amazing. It's the most amazing experience to know some other person well, really well, because we were just saying, funnily enough, this morning, how if we could talk now, if we could have talked then, when we were first married, as we can now, what on earth our marriage would have been a super thing.
It wasn't too bad, even as it stood.
No, no, we're quite satisfied with it, but I would think it's wonderful in the modern way to be able to say everything to each other. I envy the kids today.
But you're not a total pioneer. You're not a recluse. One feels you like meeting people. You certainly like wearing pretty clothes.
Love it.
You like a bit of luxury, then?
Yes, adore it. When we go ashore, we stay in the very best hotel we can possibly find, or club, and we simply ring bells and live it up.
What do you enjoy most of all when you're away?
Dancing.
Yes. And room service, I think.
Yes, yes, definitely. Ice cream, which we never have here, and everything that we shouldn't eat, we have.
Do you ever leave the island for holidays, or don't you have holidays?
No, we don't have holidays. We leave for a reason.
One time, you were completely alone,
yes.
were you not? I mean, John went away for 3 years
yes.
to earn some money.
Yes.
So, and you managed everything here by yourself?
Yes.
Well, now that was total loneliness, wasn't it?
Yes, but I had so much to do. But I'd had good practice with the stock then, and I knew how to get them down to the wharf and get them ready for a boat to take them, and that sort of thing.
You're quite a tiny lady to handle a lot of stock, aren't you?
Deceptive frail, somebody called me the other day. That was quite a good... looking pathetically frail.
You like to do everything here on the island on foot. You never ride on the tractor.
No, I love to be, and usually with bare feet.
Would you say you're fitter today than you were 30 years ago?
Oh, yes. I was a fatty and just out, I suppose, to enjoy life, really, and perhaps lazy.
I'm just trying to think what effect this kind of life has had on you. Has it made you wiser? You're certainly self-sufficient. There's no stress here. Made you a wiser person, do you feel?
Well, I feel I know most of the answers now, quite frankly. I think I do.
Is there anything in the world that you want now?
Something frightfully extravagant. One great, big, square-cut emerald ring to add to my rather small collection.
Well, that's modest enough, yes. Can you foresee the day when you'll leave 300?
Only when I'm dead. But even then I won't leave it, because John absolutely guarantees he'll put me on the compost heap so that he can grow some lovely tomatoes out of me.
I thought you were going to say you'd be buried in a lovely little grave under that beautiful tree.
No, because that's too much nuisance for people to look after. I'd rather be absolutely vanish into the atmosphere, I think. I've got no thought of it. If I die, fine. If I don't, fine. And sometimes when we're in an aircraft and the engine splutters and things like that, I think, isn't it glorious that John and he won't have to find out how to turn on the toaster, because here we go, both together, what fun. And I've got a lovely little speech ready of thank yous to him when I know the inevitable could be happening, and it'd please me, it'd be so neat.
What will you say to him?
You're the most generous and wonderful person I could ever imagine. That's about all. And we'd be holding hands, and it'd be simply super. Wouldn't it be now? Couldn't it be? How did you get on?
Oh.
It was lovely.
Touching down safely on the brow of one of Three Hummocks hills, John's home from his reunion.
Oh, it was good.
You haven't brought me the paper, have you?
Yeah.
They're together again, and all's well.
Good to see you back. Can I carry your coat? Was it a good day, really?
A lovely day.
Through there.
How did the march go?
Very good.
What happened?
Well, we all mustered by the council chambers and then marched through the town, where the governor took the salute, backed by Admiral Horton and a couple of other naval officers. And then we had a long service at Shropshire Park, with the bishop of somebody or other read the lesson and so on and so forth.
How about your old comrades?
Oh, well, of course, I saw a lot of them.
As many as you expected?
Yeah. Yes, I suppose so. Of course,
Good.
there are always a few missing. Some people can't come because, and
yeah.
Other people can't come simply because they're dead.
Yeah. Yes, that's not a bad
That's
reason.
a good, no.
We worked out that this was the first time that Eleanor had let you off the island by yourself for about 4 years.
Yes, so you feel guilty about it.
We had a lovely day.
We did. We had a very good
I'm
day.
so glad.
Absolutely marvellous.
Back on what John calls his Rolls-Royce. The tractor he bought along with the typewriter and 1 or 2 basic comforts when he sold his cattle and was out of debt for the first time for years. They still haven't got a refrigerator. They're islands in the path of the chill southwesterlies, so both Allistons have the red eyelids once only seen in engine drivers who lived with their heads stuck out in the cold, onrushing air. Three Hummock is now a game reserve. Venomous snakes are ignored, and the only animals at risk are the possums, which eat John's vegetables and sometimes pay the price. All others rest easy. But surely, arriving to farm an island at the bottom of the world must have been one mighty bound for an English naval officer from Regent's Park, NW1.
I think you could sum it up by saying that by the end of the war, I didn't want to see another gun. I didn't want to see another bombed-out thing. In fact, I wanted to make something instead of destroying something.
But, I mean, you could have done that staying on in Hampshire.
Well, I could, but we also wanted to go to somewhere where Ellen and I would have the entire bringing up of our family. We didn't want any outside influences.
Yes.
We didn't, of course, in Hampshire visualize Three Hummock Island.
But you see, in the Navy, you were surrounded, you were in a womb,
really, weren't you, in a
Oh,
warship?
absolutely.
You were surrounded by shipmates, by friends, by companionship.
The best club in the world.
Absolutely, that wardroom. So you left the ship, and you came out here to be solitary, with not another man.
Yes, yes, that's so. Well, all I can say about that, Alan, is there does come a time in your life when you have to take a sharp knife and chop everything away and start again. And that's exactly what we did.
So you dreamed of an island, John, but had you planned how you were going to cope when you got here?
No, we hadn't. And we got some nasty surprises.
Like what?
Well, for instance, I found that I had, in order to live, I had to be able to slaughter a sheep and dress it and somehow keep it and feed the kids with it.
You don't do that very often in the Navy.
I did. I'm right, you are.
So, I mean, could you cope with that?
Well, yes, you can. And that was a lesson I learnt in the war. And I dare say you have seen the same thing too, that when the pressure's on, people learn.
Fast.
So your ordinary seaman who joins the ship in wartime, he only knows how to put on his uniform and do a few knots and splices. He suddenly finds himself a member of a team, and if he doesn't learn fast, it's his own skin and the skin of his mates. And so he does learn, because he's in a tight situation, and we were in a tight situation, and so we both learned.
After all these years and all this work, what impact have you had on the island?
Very little, very little. The island's much bigger than we are, and the little bit of ploughing and clearing and fencing we've done can disappear in 10 years. You'd know no one had been here. And I'm delighted with that.
Yes.
It really shows me that this island is bigger than all us chaps who come along and fiddle around with tractors and spades and things. It's far stronger.
No, it's been quite a hard slog for you, and in fact, you haven't really made a penny out of it. You've been bankrupt most of your life.
That's quite about right, too. Well, we put it this way, we've certainly always owed money.
But it has been a bit of an expensive dream.
Yes, yes. Yes, I certainly don't think you'd recommend it unless people were as idealistic as we were. We were certainly idealistic.
Looking back, John, is there anything you would have done differently?
I'd certainly have been more clever financially. That's to say, I wouldn't have merely thought that you borrowed money and then were able to pay it back. I mean, simply because you thought that your flocks would increase at a certain rate and prices would stay the same, which they never do. I would have been much cleverer. In fact, I think I might even have done some sort of course in financial things before I came to the island, instead of thinking only of the nuts and bolts of it.
Do you feel more Australian than British after all these years?
About 50-50.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, at the test match, who do you root for?
Well, I'm really not interested in test matches.
Oh, OK. America's Cup?
A lot of baloney.
I see, all right. I can't get through to you, obviously, there. You're completely contented here.
I should say 98%.
Yes. Well, you can't say much more than that, really.
I was just trying to think what the other 2% would be.
But say...
Possibly the fact that we don't see enough of our family as we would like to.
Are you at all worried that you might have a heart attack one night when there's a gale and the planes can't land? And...
I think quite likely to have a heart attack, but I'm not worried about it. In fact, I think that would be a very good way to finish it all up. Much better than sitting in a bloody bed for a few months and people taking bits out of you and putting them back again.
You're going to be buried here?
Well, we thought the compost heap might be the right.
Oh, yes, Eleanor said the compost heap, but it's not very romantic, actually.
Well, that's true. But it's a nice thought, anyway.
Well, it might improve your vegetables, I suppose.
Well, that was the idea.
Is there anything in life that you want, John? Anything that's left to long for?
Very little. I would like to be successful with my writing. I think I've left it a bit late, but I'm having a go at it. Eleanor is successful and has been. She's a brilliant writer, really. And also she writes about the things which every one of us are interested in, whereas only a very small number of people are interested in ruddy destroyers. Everyone's interested in islands and families scratching a living on islands. Look, you can't knock Eleanor down with a 6-inch shell. That's true. She's tremendously resilient.
I like the way she told you that you were going to write a book, and by George, you wrote a book, didn't you?
Well, certainly if she hadn't sort of given the impetus, I would have lazily attended to my cabbages and forgot the book.
Have we been particularly lucky with the weather, or is it always like this?
Oh, I think you brought the magic with you.
Oh, I think it's been wonderful.
And I hear that you've had that sort of weather wherever you've been.
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely marvellous.
It could easily have been blowing a southerly gale when you wouldn't have been able to have landed on the beach.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Well, it's been a joy for us, and we're sad to see you go.
May I?
Goodbye.
Eleanor, thank you, and lots of success.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye, sir.
Yes, we admire your setup.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, it's been a wonderful time for me. Despite the drive and imagination of Minka Jones, novelist, I find the fictional lives of Tiffany and Rhett far less romantic than the true love story of Eleanor and John and their lifetime alone on a secret island.
That was lovely.
It really was beautiful.